this whole mindset that the church is not a building, it's the people. And while that's true to a point, it also can be in a building, it can be in a home, but it also needs to be
Correct.
structured with the fact that why do we have so much of the New Testament that is telling us how to structure our churches with elders, teachers,
Right. Right.
pastors, prophets, evangelists? What is the purpose of these roles if you're not going to be in community? And not only that, that we are the church body. And if you are just a random body part sitting by yourself on the side of the road, an arm isn't going to do much without the rest of the
Right.
body. And so if you're an arm not wanting to be with the body, you're going to fail. Well, welcome to the Eyes on Jesus podcast with Drew and Tim. We're here with you today and glad that you are joining us. Would you do us a favor? Just hit like and subscribe. Share this podcast. That goes a long way. You know, we could promote this, Drew, and put thousands of dollars towards this, like many
Sure.
podcasts do, and get in the top charts. But we are more of a grassroots movement, I think you would
That's
call
right.
it. And we just rely on our faithful listeners to support us. And if you like what is coming out of our mouths, we encourage you to share it on social media. So, Drew, how are you doing today? Good to see you.
Hey, good to see you. Doing really well. I'm done with the cold weather though. Like I'm over it, and I think it took me about 10 days, and I'm all set. I'm all set now.
Yeah.
So ready for spring, ready for allergies. Bring on the pollen and the scratchy throats and all that stuff. Ready to get that rolling. But yeah, man, life is good, and just continuing to find out what God has for us in 2025. How about you?
Yeah, I'm with you. I feel like this, in Arizona, our winter is 60. We hit 59 high the other day, and that was like, oh, we're in the 50s.
Wow.
We did it, but we're going up north next week to get a little bit of snow, colder weather, 30-degree high. So that'll be nice. But I
Yeah.
am ready for a little warmer weather. The problem here is it goes from like 50s, 60s and jumps right to 90s, it feels like. And so there's no like in between of enjoying 70s, 80s, which is, the sweet spot. So that can be a problem. But there's been so much, sickness going around. And it seems like this winter season has hit people really hard. So
Yeah.
I'm ready to be done with that. It's hard to talk to anyone who hasn't dealt with something going through their household. So,
Very much. Yeah.
but and I'm recording this on my birthday, which I would just want to bring up
Yeah.
because just show our audience how committed I am that I am
Committed,
still here
dude.
recording with my free Starbucks drink.
That's right.
And
33 years old, going
yeah,
strong. I
I'm gonna
like
keep
it.
the Jesus age, yeah, for
That's right.
forever. Just
And the
go
free
from there.
drink, like I've got to get on this free train of birthdays. You
Yeah, I
told
was
me
telling
you
you,
before we started recording, you told me about how when you have a birthday, like everybody gives you free stuff. And I'm like,
they do.
I've never once done that. And
Yeah.
so this is going to be the year.
At least 20
This is going
places,
to be
at
the
least
year.
20 places I could name right now that just
Ah,
give free stuff. So, but
I love it.
um, yeah, message me if you want to know.
I
That'll
love
be
it.
on our
Yeah.
members only podcast that we don't have yet.
Subscribe, find
Yeah,
out birthday updates. I love it. I love it.
exactly. Well, today we're talking about another Carrie Newhoff article. So shout out to Carrie Newhoff. Thank you for all the research you do and putting out awesome
Absolutely.
blogs and great content. And we can kind of piggyback off of it. But I really like this blog. It's 11 reasons even committed church attenders are attending less often. 11 reasons. And this is for you listening. More than likely, you are a committed church member if you're
Mm-hmm.
listening to this
That's right.
podcast with the hope of keeping your eyes on Jesus every day. And so this is more of not just, hey, this is what's happening, but this is what could happen to you if you're not careful. If you're not careful,
Right.
you're still a committed Christian, you still love Jesus, but you might be attending church less often for these 11 reasons. And so we're kind of take an assessment on them, what we've seen. We're going to hit them quickly, but also kind of talk through them a little bit and see which ones kind of resonate with you. Maybe, you have fallen into some of these as well for, not going to church as often as you'd like, and really take an assessment as we're in a new year. How can you get to church more often? Our goal is not 52 out of 52 Sundays. Even pastors don't make that because of time off, but the goal should be that you're there, pending sickness, pending,
Yeah.
family vacations, pending the things that you just can't make it. It shouldn't be because of laziness, or it shouldn't be because of some of these other reasons that kind of creep into our schedule. And we
Right.
just kind of put church on the back burner. And it's like, well, when I make it, I make it. That's not the mentality we need to have. And we'll talk about this a little bit in one of the later points, but church is essential. It is something that we can't just punt on, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the hangups with that people have in their minds of thinking that, well, church is not a building, and it's not, but we do
Yeah.
need to fellowship and not neglect that. So any thoughts before we kick off number one, Drew?
No, I mean you're right. It's just this is going to be there's going to be a consistent theme here about priority and really where you place church and where you place God's word in that. And so, like you said, we've heard all the excuses. Well, the church isn't a building. I am the church. Anywhere I go, it's church. Like, yeah, anywhere you go is the church. Are you actually capitalizing on that? It's different. Anywhere I go, I'm the church. Well, you're the church at a beach. Like, okay. I mean, what do you do? What are you doing? Like, the
Yeah.
church is getting a tan, right? So be careful. Be careful throwing out and hitting all that. So I'm with you. Certainly, the goal is not just a 52 out of 52 and everything, but like our life, like our call is to let people know about Jesus and to let people know about what He's done in our
Yeah.
lives, and in order to be filled up and in order to be enlightened and in order to be connected with other believers and have opportunities to share in a very vulnerable and honest way, church is really valuable for that. So yeah, like you said, it's going to be a fun run. First one that Carrie mentions is just greater affluence overall, just being wealthier, having more opportunities, more money. And look, uh, I get it. I get it. I grew up in a home that didn't necessarily have all the bells and whistles and have all the money to go do things. And on top of that, my dad was a pastor, and so we were at church a lot, right? And this was just how we were raised. I went through a period where I wasn't in ministry, about 8 months where I wasn't doing ministry. And hey, like, I get it. You got kids, you want to create some experiences, and you want to get away and you want to do all those things, right? But this is where we have to prioritize, again, keyword, we have to prioritize like what we're here to do. And this is a much longer and much grander game that we're playing than just the weekend that's in front of you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think with, greater financial availability, you have the temptation to spend it on frivolous things, and a lot of those frivolous things will lead you away from church. And so,
Hmm.
I've heard, and I like to say, a greater standard of living, a greater standard
Right.
of giving. And so it doesn't
Right.
mean that you need to upgrade all this stuff just because you have more money. It just means that you need to ask God, how can I be more generous with it? And
Right.
also realizing that your time is more valuable than money, because that's something that's limited, that you can't grow. And so your time, there's so much times that we waste time. I asked the question on X the other day. I was like, if you had a month left to live, what would you wish you had done more of, and what would you
Wow.
wish you had done less of?
That's really good.
Because it really makes you think, like, if we think this time is unlimited, I'm going to be here forever, we're not. Either Jesus will come back, or we're going to die like everyone else. And so, knowing that,
Hmm.
what can we do with our time? They say at the at people's grave sites that they don't get praised for what a great worker they were. They get praised for their character, their qualities, their
That's right.
family, their contribution to society.
Yeah.
And so that just made me think, like, what would I that my time, what would I wish I had done more of, and what would I, less of? Less social media, less like frivolous things that don't add
Yeah.
anything to my life or the
Yeah,
life of
that's a
others.
really
And
good point. Yeah.
I think the same thing with finances, with money. Like, more money doesn't necessarily mean more happiness. We know that's not true. And so maybe you can give more to your church and help out that way. Maybe you can, not change your budget necessarily just because you have more stuff.
Right.
And one of the questions from the blog is, should churches adjust programming to better accommodate affluent families? And I think no, we don't want to necessarily adjust what we're doing because some people are richer, and some people like to throw their money around in church too. There's one of our seniors pastor. He's been through, so he has so many good stories. And one of his stories was that someone brought him to like a Best Buy to buy all this, stuff for the worship tech, and just, I don't know how much money they spent, but as they're driving back, they're in the car together, and this guy starts saying like all the things he wants different in the church. And he stops in the
180
moment.
going back to Best
Yeah, he
Buy.
literally said, like, okay, just so you know, like, I'll accept this gift, but not at the expense of
Right.
you thinking that you have influence you don't have. I've had people threaten to, take away their tithe if we don't do something. Someone threatened to take away their tithe if we don't kick someone off the elder board. I mean, that there's a unnecessary
It's crazy.
feeling that you have this influence just because you have money and you don't. So be very careful with this one, just not letting greater wealth keep you from what really matters. So, number two, a higher focus on kids' activities. So the rise of youth sports,
Yep.
extracurricular activities, many of which are scheduled on Sundays, compete
Yep.
directly with church attendance. So youth sports participation has grown significantly, with an estimated 36 million children in the US involved in organized sports annually. And so this is a big one, right? This is,
Mm-hmm.
I'm still a Christian. I still love God. I still love my church,
Yep.
but I just can't make it Sundays for the next 8 weeks.
Right.
For the next 12 weeks, we're just in this
Right.
season and I have to be there. Well, that's months out of your time for your family. And you're also saying with your time that you prioritize sports over church.
Yeah.
And this one's tough. This one's tough because I get it. I youth sports are important. My kids are in sports, but there has to be some balance between what you can do versus saying like, I don't touch Sunday mornings. I don't touch it. There's some churches that offer Saturday night, which is great if you can, but that's going to be bigger churches that can do that. But you have to find some compromise where like one way or another, we're getting to church. And even if that
Yeah.
means that, little Bobby can't make his dream of being in the major league, which we have to be honest, there's what percent is actually going to make it anywhere with
Yeah,
their
I
sports
think
talents.
that's
But
my issue is that Bobby's not going to the major leagues,
yeah,
right? I think that's my main issue. Like I played travel ball, I played baseball at the highest level that you could for a 5'7" dude, okay? But at some point you got to go, "Hey, you're 5'7" and if you look at Major League Baseball, there's one, Jose Altuve, and he's I don't know 700% better ball player than I am. So like let's not get crazy here. And I get it. Competition's important. Having your kids in sports, I believe, is very important, especially if it's a team game. You're going to learn a lot about their leadership, their character, their kindness, their empathy, and their ability to handle defeat and victory. And those are all great lessons to learn. You don't have to learn them on Sundays. These days, every sport has options throughout the week, options on Saturdays. Worst case scenario, your kid misses a game on Sunday, whatever, man. Like
yeah,
they, you can believe little Tommy is headed to the pros, but they've got your DNA, mom and dad. Like they got your DNA, and so
hmm
there's a really good chance that's not happening. Okay, and a really good chance.
yeah,
So I think you've just got to be, just got to be mindful of that. I certainly, again, like certainly understand it, and I've lived it, and golly, there's nothing more than I want to watch my kids just be the best at what they do. But I'm already pretty much under the impression that like, you know, for my daughter to get to any kind of elite level, I've seen her play. Like she's gonna have to put a lot of work in,
yeah.
a lot, And then for my son, who's probably going to be the biggest and strongest and most coordinated out of everybody, like time will tell. But trust me, like it doesn't matter if he's playing travel ball or, school ball or just putting a video out on the internet of him, hitting or fielding or whatever sport it may be, playing football. Like good players get found in
Yeah.
any sport. If you've got a 3-point shot like Steph Curry, you can go to Davidson and they'll find you. They'll find you. So you don't have to worry too much. Talent rises to the top. It's not like if you play travel ball at 10, 11, and 12, somebody from, the University of Tennessee is going to come knocking on your door and be like, "Hey, I saw your 12-year-old can throw it really hard from shortstop." Doesn't matter.
There's a
Just
video I
doesn't
saw
matter.
of someone shooting hoops out front of his house, and they're like, every childhood's dream, and he's shooting and he's horrible. And then the scout pulls up and he's like, "Hey, I saw you shooting hoops."
I know.
He's like, "We're looking." Did you see that one?
I
That was
did.
hilarious to me because, like,
That's
yeah, when
it.
you're, I remember shooting hoops outside. I was like, "Oh, I'm just gonna," you put your mindset in the NBA finals or whatever. And
Yeah, totally. One day I'm
yeah,
going to play for Duke University. And then in high school, you stop growing and everyone else keeps growing. And you realize you're never going to play basketball again,
just
ever.
hypothetical,
Just a pickup game from time to time. That's it. That's my life now.
purely hypothetical. Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yep.
All
Yep.
right.
Totally.
Number three is more travel. So increased disposable income, flexibility in work schedules, more people online enable families to travel more often, leading to irregular attendance. And so this
Hmm.
this is going to happen. You should take trips with your families and things like that, but you just have to make sure that probably it's not more than is healthy. And also, I think there's other options, with the digital options. You can still attend online while you're away. There's also, I like, checking out other churches.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
being that in ministry, you see like, oh, they're doing this, they're doing that. Just kind of, you still get church, but also like you get little ideas to take back from me personally. But this is just one of the things, like, I don't know, some people be like, I'd love to have this problem. We don't even get to travel more than once a year. And so it kind of just depends. But if you're traveling, if you're missing church once a month, I think with travel,
Yeah.
kind of have to assess.
Yeah. And again, this is why spiritual habits are important. And this is why, as a church, it's important to make sure you're not just structuring your ministry for those that are there every week, and you're also not structuring your ministry for people who are never there, right? Like, you've got to find this happy medium balance. And so you want to honor the committed. You also want to honor the people that, are still trying to figure some things out. And so, if you're doing like a sermon series, for instance, you want to make sure that if you miss a week, you're not just like messed up now, and that
Right.
means you need to start your sermon in a certain way and backtrack and be able to bring it all together. So communication's important for that. And then also, when people are going away, if they're going away from your church for a week or two, then like you should have been teaching like spiritual accountability and making sure people understand the value of being in the Bible, and make sure they understand the value of like checking in. And then there also should be like accountability to check in with them even when they're away. Like, are they part of a discipleship group of some kind or a
Yeah.
serve team of some kind? If they're gone, like, someone needs to reach out to them, even if we know it's just for vacation. Hey, we missed you today. You know,
Yeah.
hey, we hope this is the scripture we had today. Or, hey, do you want to see my notes from the sermon today? Like, these are the things that we want to make sure are happening. So I'm with you. Traveling, like, you're going to do that. And certainly if you have more money, you might travel a little more experiences, kids, things like that. But we want to make sure that we stay connected to the church.
Yep. Number 4, blended and single parent families. Complex family structures, such as shared custody arrangements, create scheduling conflicts that hinder regular attendance.
Yeah.
23% of U.S. children living in single parent households in the U.S. Blended families represent a growing demographic. And so, if you have custody on the weekends or don't have your children on the weekends, you might either be traveling to drop them off, or you might not want to come to church without your kids. There could be a lot of thoughts that go into that. Just something to be aware of. If you're already in that situation, you can't really do much about it other than,
Right.
you might also have a parenting conflict with the other spouse, or the other ex-spouse not wanting to
Right.
take the kids to church. And so they either get the church experience with you and not them, or vice versa. And so that creates conflict and some confusion with the kids too, not knowing which parent to believe has it all together spiritually. And so, how can churches best support single parent families and blended families? What ministries or services might address these challenges? Something to think of. I like how you said we often create a sermon series, 4 6 weeks, and we're like, this is going to be a great package altogether. Like, if everyone hears every sermon, like, it's going to be really powerful. And like, the
Sure.
reality is they'll hear like half of it, or they'll come,
Right. 3 or 4.
3 weeks into it and miss the first two and be
Yep.
confused. And like, we assume they're going to listen to it after the fact, and many times they don't. And in our mind, we put these packages together, create these great sermon graphics, and
Yep.
it's like, man, I think most people that are just coming are just like, whatever you got for me today,
Correct. Yeah.
and
And that's why we've moved away from all that. Like, I'm in the middle of a series right now, but we're not even like titling it anymore. And
mm,
there's no sermon graphic. Like, when I preach, it just says yes behind us, and then everything else is scripture.
mm,
We've moved away from that because it does take energy to create a sermon graphic. It does take energy to create, a bumper video if your church does that. It does
yeah,
take energy to create some kind of promo for online. It does take energy to and here's what I got to get to. If you already come to our church, then the title of my message does not matter to you.
yeah,
If you're sometimes coming to my church, then the title of my message hasn't been enough for you in the past, and you still can't decide if it's enough for you now. And if you've never been to my church, the title of my message is not going to get you there. Like, the days of pastors being like, ooh, we're doing I call this series, are you in hell or something like that? It's like, what are we doing? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like I'll never forget during the political like turmoil of 2020 and all the COVID stuff, like somebody did a whole thing on like, they were like, this Sunday, I'm going to tell you how to vote. And it was such a crapshoot and really a lie. And everyone showed up to go, how's the pastor going to vote? And the pastor basically like beat around the bush the entire time and basically got to the point of you need to vote how you feel led. So number one, you showed a ton of weakness by saying vote how you feel led. Number two, you lied to everybody. And number three, all the first time guests that came, now what are you going to do? Tell them that next week's going to be awesome? They don't believe you. So you
I know.
screwed up, so
Yeah.
like so people are going to go where they see value. You don't go to Chick-fil-A and eat there because it's titled Chick-fil-A. Like you don't. You
Yeah.
don't you don't go there because their colors are red and white. You don't. You go there because it's the same experience every time. 99.9% of the time they get your order correct. 99.9% of the time the food is consistent, good, warm, and exactly the way you remember it. You have a great experience and you find value there. So when they up their prices, you don't care because you find value there. A church is not going to be able to get away with, don't we have a cool name, cool vision statement, cool colors, and a cool sermon title? How
Yeah.
about you tell me about ministry? Are you doing ministry? Are you telling me about Jesus? Are you allowing me to grow in my faith? If so, I will find value there. And you can title your sermon anything you want, and I will show up. That's
Yep,
how it
that's true.
works.
That's true. All right, let's move on to number 5. Online options of decreasing attendance. So, availability of online church services offers convenience, especially post pandemic. A significant percentage of churchgoers, around 40%, reported attending
Jeez.
services primarily online. That's not once in a
It's
while. That's not when you
crazy,
get
dude.
sick. Or when you're traveling. That's 40%
Yep.
primarily online. That's a problem.
Yep.
And
It
I think
is.
that if this is the reason that your church is decreasing attendance, you scrap your online. You
Oh,
scrap it.
100%.
That's what you guys
100%.
do.
But
Yeah.
that's my question, Tim. Yeah, whose fault is this? So this one right here, everything that we've talked about so far is just life. Whose fault is this right here? That 40% reported attending services primarily online.
Hmm.
This is the church, dude. This is
Yeah.
the church's fault. We have said it's okay. We're not going to do a Christmas Eve service. We're just going to be online. We're not going to do a service this Sunday, next Sunday, or the following Sunday. We're just going to be online. Just tune in online. Hey, did you miss last Sunday? That's okay. Watch it online. They're not watching it.
Hmm.
They're not watching it. You know why they're not watching it? Because they can watch Elevation. They can watch Transformation. They can watch Life Church. They can watch other churches that are better than you.
In
And yeah,
4K.
in 4K, right? So they, these, I don't even believe that. Like the 40% that reported attend services primarily online, I don't even think that they're consistent in the online services that they attend. So if if 40% of the people are watching online, chances are your church isn't all 40% of those. It's
Yeah.
not.
No.
So I think the church has done, we were so scared when COVID happened, we had to
Hmm.
all get online, and then everybody wanted to try and be Elevation because they led the way in online ministry. Now COVID is over, and we've been taught you can't let go of this ministry. Well, have you stopped, paused, prayed, and asked yourself, is God calling me to this ministry?
Hmm.
Because I'll tell you this: if you've put tithe money towards online and you're not called to online, you've really messed things up. And so all we did as a church is took time as elders to go, are we called to be online? Yes, we feel called to be online. Great. Do we feel like our online live presence should be a priority for our church and our demographic and what we're trying to do, like what our vision statement is, and also who's coming to our church? The answer was no. So we scrapped it. You got to
Yeah.
remember, Elevation has seeker friendly services. Doesn't mean the gospel isn't presented. Doesn't mean the worship's not great. I get all that. I'm not knocking it. Okay. I'm saying they are playing to their demographic and who comes to their church. Good for them.
Hmm.
There's I have a hard time believing that the exact same demographic comes to every church in America.
Yeah.
They certainly don't go to mine. So, like, recognize who's coming to your church and who you're here for, and step into the calling and the direction and the vision that God's called you to.
Yeah.
Don't just jump online because every podcast or every forward thinker is telling you to. They don't have to own the decision or work through it. You do.
Yeah. And if you're legitimately attracting people from across the country, then it makes sense like for an elevation to do it because people aren't
Yeah.
going to come to their building. But for most churches, the people you're
Yeah.
attracting online are the lazy members in your church that don't want to
Right.
come. And so you're just
Right.
creating a path for them to just stay in their slippers and not be in community or use their giftings or serve your church. So it really is a balance that you need to look at. It's something that I think I'm glad we have it. I'm glad that people can do it when they're sick or staying connected, but it can also be something that people just use as a crutch. And it's not how we're meant to be in community
That's right.
ultimately. So, all right. Number 6 is interesting, the cultural disappearance of guilt. Social
Like
norms
this
have
one.
shifted, and the sense of obligation tied to church attendance has diminished over time. A growing segment of Americans, 29% in 2021, identify as religiously unaffiliated, rejecting changing attitudes towards traditional practices. So, the question is, how can churches inspire participation through meaning and joy and the why we do this to begin with versus guilt? There's, I think, 80s, 90s. I remember growing up in youth group, and it's like, you don't drink, you don't have rock and roll, you don't have sex, or you don't definitely don't have dancing because dancing leads
None of
to
that.
sex.
That's
Um,
right.
and so, or if you're Baptist, sex leads to dancing.
Sex like
That's
the
even worse.
dancing.
And
That's what I was
so,
going with. I love
yeah,
it.
yeah. So, there's this whole like guilt mentality that has been prevalent without directing people to relationship, which is what we have with Jesus. It's a relationship, it's not an obligation, it's not this religious
Right.
browbeating with the Bible of your head. And I think we've done a disservice to our youth by not showing them Jesus, but just showing them the rules. And what they do will send them to hell. And we use this harsh language and doesn't drive people to really want the truth of relationship with Jesus. And so if this is the cultural norm that I don't need to go to church, people are going to buy into that and they're going to believe it. And I think we're going to hit this next point too. But, guilt is not a good thing. And we shouldn't
Right.
use it as a marketing technique in our churches,
Nope.
but also we need to explain why the whys to them. And, the conviction that comes from the Holy Spirit should drive you to do the things that Jesus says, if you love me, obey my commandments. And if God and love others, you have to be in community to love others and you have to learn, with others and use your gifting. So,
Yeah, this is about being biblical, you know? Like
mhm.
let's just be biblical. Let's not push it through guilt here, and let's inspire participation through joy.
Yeah,
And we do that through recognizing who Jesus is and recognizing who we are, and in all gratitude recognizing that he loves us and wants to be in a relationship with us. That's
yeah.
essentially where the joy, the gratitude comes from.
So number 7, we're going to camp out here for a few minutes. So self-directed spirituality. So this is where people like, hey, it's just me and Holy Spirit.
Right.
Holy Spirit's the best teacher, and all I need is God. It's just me and my homeboy Jesus kicking it. I don't need to be in community. And a growing number of individuals believe that they don't need to be quote in church. And I saw this a few weeks ago with a sermon clip where our pastor was saying that you can't love Jesus and not love his church, and that's how the clip started. And there was a lot of comments. Some of the comments were like, I've studied the Bible for 35 years and I no longer need to be in fellowship with people. And I'm just like, are you really
That's a
studying the Bible?
different kind of spirit leading you
Yeah.
there, my guy.
So
Yeah.
this whole mindset that the church is not a building, it's the people. And while that's true to a point, it also can be in a building, it can be in a home, but it also needs to be
Correct.
structured with the fact that why do we have so much of the New Testament that is telling us how to structure our churches with elders, teachers,
Right. Right.
pastors, prophets, evangelists? What is the purpose of these roles if you're not going to be in community? There's no
Correct.
purpose for that. I can
Correct.
just quote teach myself and I don't need to be around a pastor or a teacher, and that's wrong because there's so much we can learn by being in community and not just getting filled up, but you have giftings that God has given you.
Sure.
Since before the creation of the earth, of Ephesians says God has equipped you with these things which is to be used to building up the community. And not only that we are the church body, and if you are just a random body part sitting by yourself on the side of the road, an arm isn't going to do much without the rest of the
Right.
body. And so if you're an arm not wanting to be with the body, you're going to fail.
That's right. And you can't discount, like you said, you can't discount all the moments in the Bible where we're learning how to build the church. You also can't discount all the moments in the Bible where Jesus spoke directly against the Sadducees and Pharisees, or discount First Timothy. Okay, like you can't discount the, hey, here is how you outline a church and it's to be done. You also
Hmm.
can't discount that's not how it is to be done.
Right.
You can't do that. That's like half the Bible. It's
Yeah.
literally like half the Bible is like, hey, you're doing it right, or hey, you're doing it wrong. And it's in relation most of the time to leaders in the church. So must be important. It was spoken to both ways, both sides. So it must be important. So, for all of you who are like, oh, I've been burnt. I mean, listen, I've had this conversation so many times. I've been burned by the church. I don't see value in the church. So I have a relationship with Christ on my own. It's like, cool. Next question. How's that going?
How
Dot,
would you
dot, dot.
know?
Not well.
Yeah,
Not
who
well.
could tell you who are you accountable with
Right.
that could tell you it's not going well? Because you
Yeah,
just
you're your own God at this point,
yeah.
because you decide what's right and wrong because you're not filtering it through anything. And if you're like, oh no, I watch reels, listen to podcasts, watch YouTube videos, and read my Bible, dude, like you're gonna fall into moralism so quick
Hmm.
that it's not even funny, because that's what's comfortable. And this is really what it comes back to. Like, look, if we were really to look at all of these, we talked about priorities, right? We talked about priorities at the beginning, but like, can we just take a second and recap? Oh, number one, I have more money, so I'm more comfortable. Number two, my kids are more into things and I want them to like me because I'd rather be their friend than their parent. So now this is what we're doing. Oh, we're traveling more. Oh, yeah, it's comfortable to travel. Oh, yeah, okay. So I'm watching more online now. It's comfortable. I like being in my jammies and having my coffee. Oh, the guilt thing. I don't like feeling guilty. I don't like making people feel guilty. I don't even want to be around anybody making anybody feel guilty. Cool. Okay, so now here we are at number 7, self-directed spirituality. What's more comfortable than being my own God? There's
Yeah,
nothing more
totally.
comfortable than that.
Hmm.
So I love it. It's
Yep.
like wearing this hoodie. It's so comfortable. So I'll just make that my religion, and I'll follow a Jesus who's not in the Bible, and I'll follow my own man-made doctrine that's not in the
Hmm.
Bible, but I'll tell people and at least sound like I know enough to where I'll be okay. And here's the thing. That's going to be fine while you're here on earth. That'll be fine. Like, if that's what
Hmm.
you want to do, it's fine. I just worry about what happens for all the people who like believe there's not a hell, and then when they die find out there is one. That's the only thing I worry about.
Yeah.
And so what we're trying to express to you through going through this outline is not only how important church is, spiritual growth is, but like, man, please, please, please be so careful not to fall into these traps that pull you out of being uncomfortable, that pull you out of being disciplined. Oh, you don't like getting up in the early in the morning, you don't like serving at church, you don't like, man, that's all about being comfortable. Like, there is not, listen, you want to know what the most uncomfortable thing is about your Bible? This guy named Jesus.
Yeah.
He's the most uncomfortable thing about it. So if you say, I'm surrendering to Jesus, did you really think that life was going to get more comfortable or less
Hmm.
comfortable? So
Yeah.
let's be smart about this. If you have an allegiance to Jesus, your comfort is no longer the priority, because God is not in covenant with your comfort,
There you
right?
go. I like
So
that.
that's the deal. So I love that we're going through this, and I love that we're seeing like, hey, there's biblical precedent here. We need to be part of a body of believers. And like you said, they speak to the body of Christ. The Bible speaks to the roles of pastors and teachers and elders. And then the thing you have here on why the lone wolf approach falls short. Without accountability and encouragement from others, it's easy to drift. Boom, right? You can't find your blind spots. Spiritual growth often occurs through relationship, learning from another's experience. So, like, you
Yeah.
touched on that a second ago. Like, dude, isn't that so awesome that we get to do that?
Yeah.
Isn't it amazing that we get to learn from each other? I mean, I know for me, think about when we created our budget for our church last year. I came to you and I was like, hey, can you help me?
Mhm.
And you're like,
Mhm.
yeah, this is what I do. And you
Mhm.
straight up like sent me an outline and you literally were a difference maker at my church across the country. Like that was a tactical thing, but that doesn't count all the spiritual conversations we've had over the years.
Yeah.
So you've got to have that. And then lastly, of course, churches offer a place to worship corporately where I'm sharing my faith with you. I'm sharing
Yeah.
my strength with you. I'm holding your arms up, you're holding my arms up.
Yeah.
And that's powerful. That's offensive to hell, you know? That is an
Mhm.
offense to hell when you are gathering as a church and worshiping and declaring, "Hey, get a look. This is the opposition. This is what hell is up against right here, this church." And the Bible tells us that the gates of hell will not prevail. And that's why we do what we do, because we are what moves Christianity forward through
Yeah.
Jesus.
Iron sharpens iron. If you're by yourself, no one's sharpening you. You're not sharpening anyone else. And I think with our information age, it's easy to fall into this like, I'll just teach myself from the resources available. And this is the opposite,
Yeah,
early Catholic Church, like we can't trust people with the Bible. We're going to tell them, the things about it and add some things in there to get more money. And now it's the opposite. It's like we have access to all the resources, every
right.
heretical book, every good book. We can go to seminary ourselves, self-directed courses for ourselves. We can hear 500 sermons in a week if we want to. It's
Totally.
information overload, and so it makes us fall into this thinking that like I'm good. I've learned a lot of stuff, and that must mean that I don't need my pastor. I don't need community, and
Right.
this falls into the perspective of thinking that church is just a personal experience. And it's not. It's not just about you. It's a vital, God ordained community designed for collective worship, growth, and a mission. Like there's so much more on mission that we can do together when we pool our resources, helping local, global missions, outreach opportunities, benevolence programs. All this the local church does because of the corporate influence of everyone pooling resources and time and talents together. And that's not the impacts you can have by yourself in your house giving $5 to a charity that you think is important.
Right. Okay, so how does the church address this? Like what do we do as the church to say, "Hey, like you you need the church and the church needs you." Have you ever heard that said from the pulpit before? "Hey, you need the church, you need us, we need you."
Hmm.
And I think one, like we've got to be able to show value like we talked about earlier. We've got to be able to show that like what you get here you can't get home. I'll argue that if someone in your congregation won't come to church, yeah, part of that is certainly on them 100%, but you should also assess like why won't they come to church?
Yeah.
Like are we not that much better than living room and online? Like are we not that much better? So it might be worth taking
Yeah.
an assess. But like you've got to you've got to figure out where the ownership is lacking, and you got to figure out where the Bible is not being presented in a way for people to
Yeah.
understand that.
You got to have those tough conversations. And there's so many times that I'll text someone that I haven't seen in 3, 4 weeks, just being like, hey, how's it going? Haven't seen you in a while. And literally the next Sunday they show up. Like
Yeah.
9 times out
Yeah.
of 10, that's the way it happens. And I personally hate that. I hate the fact that thinking that I got you to church just because I called you out. But I'm a pastor. I guess that's my role. Like, I need to do it in a loving way. I also need to understand extenuating circumstances. And I also need to be, this is why we started after COVID. We started more of a membership. We call it covenant membership because if you're in covenant with the church, it means you're going to be for us. We're for you. We have a mutual respect and relationship where you're serving, giving. We're upfront with you. We're going to check in with you monthly. We've sent a separate email to covenant members, but it came
Hmm.
out of the fact that out of 2020, so many people either left the church or stopped showing up and never told anyone. And then we're
Right.
upset that we didn't know. Like,
Right.
you didn't know I was in the hospital because you never told us.
Never told us. I
You
didn't even
stopped
think
coming
I
for
was.
6 months.
Yeah.
Like, do you realize how many people come here? Like, you
Right.
slipped through the cracks and didn't tell us, like, hey, we're going to another church and now you're offended.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
you got to be upfront with your church. Like if you're on an extended, vacation, if you do choose to go to another church, like we had a whole episode on when to leave a church.
Window,
There's good reasons to leave a church. We put another episode, reasons to pick a church.
right?
I love those two episodes because those are important things to consider.
Yeah,
But if you do choose another church, just give your leadership a heads up. Please just tell
right,
them, hey, I love my time here. I hated my time here. Whatever you want to say, just tell
right,
them what's happening. And so they don't wonder in 6 months, hey, where's Tim been? I haven't seen him in a while. Like just
right.
out of respect, like that's part of being in community, and it's part of what the mission we're on. I think this runs into the next one. You fail to see the direct benefit of church. Some attendees feel that church services don't provide enough tangible value to justify regular attendance. And I think this is so much has to do with the American church culture we're in, of you show up once a week and you blend in. Nobody knows you're there. If you miss it, nobody knows you weren't there. I'm going to go to a big church that I don't have to serve or use my gifts or even give because they're doing well.
Right.
And
I'm gonna get
then
my coffee. I'm gonna get my
after so
donuts.
many months, you're just like, what's the point? Like, is
Yeah.
this really what I'm called to do? And forget it. I don't need to go. I'm still a
Right.
Christian. I'm still good with God. Right. And we justified it in our mind because the church hasn't been on mission enough to say, like, hey, when you come, you're going to experience God. We're going to have
That's
times when the
right.
Holy Spirit moves and the presence of God is so thick. Like you can't not come because you have to
Tell
be
them.
in his presence. That is what we need to offer, is something that you can't find anywhere else. You can't find this at a coffee shop, at a Buddhist temple, anywhere else. You have to come to church to experience the power of the living God and not the false witchcraft ideas that are out there that you experience demonic powers. Like, you want to experience the real God, you're going to come to church because this is where he is. His presence dwells among us and through us, and you can experience him in your quiet time, but there's also a manifest presence that comes in corporate gathering of people that are hungry for him.
That's right. Come on, dude. Let's go.
Bam.
If we didn't have 2 more points, I would just say leave the podcast right there and just close
Yeah.
it out.
Drop the
Well,
mic.
okay, so the question then becomes, well, what can churches do to ensure services are impactful and relevant? Okay, can I take this one?
Go for it.
All right, here we go. It's it's a far out there idea, okay, and I hope everybody can follow me. All right, pastors, leaders, listen up. What can churches do to ensure services are impactful and relevant? Bible and presence. That's my time, folks.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks so
My
much.
TED Talk.
Bible and presence. Listen, if I were to, I'm telling you right now, I bet if I called up 20 ministry leaders and said, what can churches do to ensure services that are impactful and relevant? If I called up 20 ministry leaders right now, I'm thinking at least 18 of the 20 are going to give me a book they've read recently, a podcast they've listened to recently, a retreat they went on recently, something that their church is trying and started recently, or some kind of conference they went to and learned about recently. 18 of the 20, I bet, would say, oh, I'll tell you how to be impactful and relevant. I heard about this one church. They're doing da 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 da. So we're trying that. And they think it's systematic. They think there's some kind of structure or process. You want to make sure your services are impactful and relevant, get out of the way. Because newsflash, Drew Barker, I'm not impactful. I'm not relevant. I'm not. I'm not impactful. I'm not relevant. I know I'm not relevant every time I go to a youth gathering on Wednesday nights. I am no longer relevant. I know that. I
Yeah.
know that. So I'm not relevant on my own. Impactful? No. Like I mean, I'm pretty hit or miss by myself. But if I get out of the way and make sure that our services are focused around the Bible and the presence of God, suddenly we are impactful and relevant.
Right.
That's it. So you might hear this and push back and want, yeah, Drew, I hear you. Okay, Bible presence, but it's got to go past that. Not according to what I see in the Bible. Not according to the ministry of Jesus. It really doesn't have to go past that.
Mm-hmm.
It really doesn't. It really doesn't. I'm willing to bet that at least my plan, if from now until the day I die, I just do Bible and presence, I'm willing to bet that we continue to be impactful and relevant as a church. If we stop being impactful and relevant as a church, someone needs to come to me and be like, when was the last time you focused on Bible and presence? Because the problem's going to be with me. The problem's not going to be with God.
Yeah.
So I think that's where we've got to roll. And again, like, how does the church communicate its value to its members? If you will do that, you won't have to you won't have to communicate too much. I
Yeah.
really don't. I don't think anybody's going to be going like, I can't tell you the amount of people that have come to my church recently, which by the way, Yes Church, our attendance is up 48% this year over
Wow.
last year, which
Mhm.
is just incredible. What a start to the
Amazing.
year, right? And we have all these new families coming, and all the new families say the exact same thing. They all literally, they all say either one, you're the best kept secret, which we won't be secret very long. And two, the other thing they say is nobody's doing what you're doing.
Mm.
And then I go, can you tell me what we're doing? And you know what they say? We get out of the way.
Mm. I
We
like
don't
that.
have all the crazy production and lights.
Mhm.
We're not consumed with making sure our services are 60 minutes.
Yeah.
We're allowing the spirit to dwell and move.
Mm.
And somehow that is quote nobody's doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
Dude, all we're doing is Bible and presence.
Really? No one's doing that?
No one's doing it.
All
That's
right.
wild.
The next 3 actually we've kinda covered, so we'll go through them real quick. So number 9
Okay.
is valuing attendance over engagement. This is just churches that
Yeah.
prioritize numbers over actually fostering engagement, and this is on
Right.
church leadership to make sure you're not just looking at people as a
Yep.
number, but actually looking at them as, "Hey, what can they offer? How can I engage with them where they're at in their life and pull them forward in discipleship?" So we've talked about
Behind every
discipleship.
metric is a person, behind every person is a story, right? So
Yeah.
you can't focus on the metric, you got to focus on the person in the story.
Yeah.
Yep, cool.
Number 10 is a massive cultural shift. So we have secularization and alternate community structures have made traditional churches less central to people's lives. Church attendance in the US has fallen to an all time low with only 47% of Americans reporting regular participation.
I think
And
this is
yeah,
about to change.
I agree. And, we can't look like the culture. I mean, look at the churches that have grown in persecuted countries. And
Yep.
they're saying China is going to be the
Yeah.
most Christian country in the world or
Isn't
something.
that wild? Yeah, no,
Yeah,
that's you're accurate. You're accurate. It's
crazy.
China that's going to be yeah, and it's because they've been persecuted and they're like, bring it.
Right.
Like we're doing this.
Yeah.
And that should tell us something. And even if you go back to the Life Church multi-site movement, like they grabbed that from overseas, right?
Mm,
Like Craig Rochelle even tell you he didn't create that.
yeah.
Like he took that from, and I'll get the country wrong, so I don't want to even
Yeah.
try to figure out when it was, but it was from overseas. He went and visited a church over there and found out that they were small in many locations,
That's
and so
Francis
he
Chan
brought it.
too, man.
Yeah, same deal, right? So now what's happening overseas? Well, right now overseas Christianity is exploding. Why? Well, because it's time to get serious about it. Okay. Well, let's take a look at America.
Mhm.
Like we usually follow suit. And I think that number of 47% with regular participation, I think we're about to see that increase quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. The last one is the availability of online content. We mentioned this before with the amount of resources you can access. You have easy access to high quality online sermons and religious content from all over. And,
Yeah.
I've mentioned this before to our church is like you can literally go to wherever your itching ears want to hear, just like First Timothy, Second Timothy says, like people are going to be seeking after
Yep.
what they want to hear. And literally, if you have a preconceived idea of something, you can find a sermon that tells you exactly what you want to hear. And there's a whole
Yep.
movements of, law, Torah. I don't like Paul. I like Jesus. I mean, you name it. You
Right.
can find stuff out there that aligns with what you want to believe. And that's the danger of having so much content, too, is that you're no longer, trusting your pastor to bring you a sermon every week that's from God for your church, for your community. You're now going to whoever has the fanciest 4K camera that can tell you either what you want to hear or tell you something good, but
Right.
also like it just goes into your ears and then out and you don't do anything with it. And I think that's the danger of online content right now. And also as we go more towards uh, AI and more towards things that sound good, that look good, I think this is going to impact the local church if people are just looking to the fancy like shiny thing like, oh, where can I look next, instead of being grounded where God has planted you.
Yeah, for sure. And we have created a culture that would rather worship Moses than worship Jesus. And so we know that Moses can go up the mountain and talk to Jesus. And so we'll just worship Moses and he can just tell us what Jesus said
Mm,
and or tell us what God said. And the problem
yeah.
with that is Jesus came so that we don't have to do that. So when you're listening to podcasts and all these sermons, and look, hey, you're talking to a guy who listens to all of it and loves it. But if you're doing that to then negate the time that you spend, the personal time that you spend in God's presence,
Mhm.
you're missing it. You're really, really missing it. And yeah, it's a challenge. So I love what you said too about pastors. Like, pastors are praying for their congregation, for their people, preaching to them. Now,
Mhm.
there are a few anomalies in that, okay? Like, I've witnessed people like Stephen Furtick. I've worked on that staff, and I know it's very different when you're preaching to a congregation and preaching to the world. It's
Right.
very different. And
Mhm.
that's a lot of pressure and a big gap to fill. So if you're going to a church and listening to a pastor that's been praying for you and praying for your congregation and praying over what to tell you, and then you negate that, but then you go listen to, more of a celebrity pastor or someone that's a little more famous, understand, like, I'm not saying that doesn't have impact. I'm just saying that the goal of anything that is said from the pulpit, the goal of anything that is said through prophecy, the goal of anything that is revealed to you is to then be taken to God. So if you're just consuming podcast after podcast, sermon after sermon, Bible study after Bible study, and you're never sitting down with God and going, okay, what does this mean to me? What would you have for me? Then you're missing the fact that God has a unique relationship with you and a
Mhm.
personal relationship with you. And that's the best part of all of this, is that he, like, loves you and knows you. And he might want to reveal something to you through a podcast or through a sermon that he did not reveal to someone else. But you're not going to get that if you don't go spend time with him. So
Yeah.
I want that to be the encouragement to our listeners today. Like, whatever you spend time doing, whether it's at your church, whether you're, maybe you haven't been going lately and you've been watching a little more online, or maybe you do a little bit of both. Like, I don't know what it is for you, but don't miss the moment of being in presence so that you can discover what is uniquely equipped for you.
Yeah, that's good. And I think, it would be like if you knew somebody in their 40s and they're like, I'm working on my sixth degree. And you're like, what are you doing with it? Oh, no, after this, I'm going to get a seventh degree. You're like, dude,
Yeah. Like,
completely
go get a
pointless. You're not
job.
doing anything with it. You don't even have a
Right.
job. You're just going to school nonstop. Like, that's what we do in
Right.
the Christian world. Is like, and the cool part is you don't have to wait for a 4-year thing. Like, the moment you receive Christ, you can go and do
Right.
something, right? And that's what a
Right.
lot of Christians that have been in the church their whole life look at these new Christians and they condemn them for not having perfect theology. It's like, did you have perfect theology day one of your Christian race? Like, no, that's why you needed to be in community, but don't also squelch the passion of this person that wants to go talk
Right.
to people and tell them about Jesus. Like, encourage them, right? And I see that online with these celebrities that turn to Christ and they just get bombarded, right? They get bombarded by people that are like, oh, you said this wrong. It's like, oh man, like let's just
Yeah.
encourage each other. So great
Exactly.
episode. Yeah, don't feel
Yeah. Back
condemned if
at
you
you.
haven't been to church. I hope that this pushes you towards community. You need it. We need it. We are built for it. And this digital age will lie to us and
Yeah.
tell us that we just need a chat bot. We need just something on a screen and we need a face-to-face human connection. We're built for that. So let us know your thoughts. Let us know if there's, want to share your struggles with us, want to let us know things that are getting in the way of your church attendance. We would love to hear it. No judgment on our end, but maybe this episode has pushed you into something new for this year. Again, go to kingdomandwill.com, use code eyes on Jesus for 15% off. This is
I
one of the
see it
shirts.
on your
Jesus.
birthday, dude. It's
Bam.
awesome.
Yep.
It's awesome.
I might buy myself a new shirt for my birthday. Who knows? And then
Do it.
um, email us, eyes on Jesus podcast at outlook.com. Like and share the show. And we're glad you joined us. And until next time, go with God, grow in discernment, and keep your eyes on Jesus.
Thanks for joining us on the Eyes on Jesus podcast with Drew and Tim. Don't forget to hit subscribe